You're listening to Overhead Story Channel. Enjoy.
I wasn't even supposed to be there. 5 years is a long time to disappear. Long enough to let people assume you've started over somewhere new, or just gone silent. For me, it was both. I left Chicago without much of a goodbye, shut down my social media, canceled plans one by one until people stopped making them. I told myself I needed distance. From the company, the noise, the marriage that had stopped making sense. What I didn't realize until I stepped back into that city skyline was how much it had kept spinning without me. The night I returned, it was on a whim. My old department at Wilcox Global was hosting a corporate mixer, and Tom, the kind of guy who never forgets a face, saw my name in an old email thread and sent an invite with a smiley face and a dude. Crash it. It'll be weirdly fun. So I went. The ballroom was exactly what I remembered. Gold accents, terrible acoustics, and the kind of lighting that made your teeth look too white in photos. I nodded at a few familiar faces, collected a name tag from the reception desk, blank, thank God, and made a beeline for the bar. I wasn't even halfway through my first club soda when I saw her. Liv, my ex-wife, my ghost. She stood across the room under a burst of chandelier crystals, talking animatedly to a cluster of men and women in tailored blazers. Her hair was longer now, darker. Her smile was looser than I remembered, effortless even. And in her hand was a glass of wine. Wine stopped me cold. She used to say wine gave her migraines. I remember one night, I think it was our 3rd anniversary. She'd swatted away a sommelier at some fancy French place and ordered soda water with lime. I don't want to spend the night squinting in pain, she'd told me. Now, there she was, holding a glass of red like it belonged in her hand. I should have walked away, should have turned and left before she saw me. But something rooted me in place. Not curiosity exactly, more like gravity. From where I stood, I could see her in profile. The way she tilted her chin when she laughed. The way her fingers, still with that slight tremble at the tips, curled around the stem of her glass. And the man beside her, tall, clean-cut, expensive. He wasn't touching her, not really. But her hand was resting on his forearm in that way people do when they're not thinking, like it was second nature. And that's what got me. That detail. That hand. She used to do that with me. It was the kind of moment that probably wouldn't register to most people. Maybe it looked innocent, just a casual pose, a still frame caught in the middle of some forgettable conversation. But to me it looked practiced. Int asterisk mate. Too comfortable. I turned away and tried to disappear into the crowd, heart hammering like I just sprinted across the ballroom floor. I spent the next half hour half hiding behind tall floral arrangements and pretending to read the bar menu. I wasn't ready for her to see me yet. Not until I figured out why seeing her again felt less like nostalgia and more like warning. The next day, the event photos dropped in a shared Google Drive. The intern in charge of PR had gone a little overboard with the candids. I got the link from Tom with the message, LOL, you made the album. Bro, good to see you again. Most of the sh*TS were standard fare. Group pics, pose smiles, awkward handshakes. Then I scrolled. And there she was. Liv. Laughing mid-sentence. Glass in hand. Standing next to the same man from the night before. Her body angled slightly toward him, shoulder brushing his. Her hand, that same light touch, rested on his arm. I stared at the photo for a long time. Zoomed in. Zoomed out. Clicked to the next one. Then back again. It wasn't just the posture. It was her face. Her expression. She looked content. At ease in a way I hadn't seen in years. Not even when we were happy. It wasn't just that she had moved on. It was that she had rewritten herself entirely. The man, I learned with a few clicks, was Marcus Thorne, her new boss. Regional director at Whitbridge Consulting. He had a string of articles online praising his visionary leadership and hands-on mentorship. He looked like someone who woke up at 5:30 a.m. to meditate and somehow still found time to write leadership blogs before lunch. Liv once told me she hated corporate culture, called it glorified narcissism. She used to mock people who quoted their bosses like prophets. Now here she was, mingling like she'd never said any of that, like she had always belonged in that world. I waited a few days before reaching out. We hadn't spoken since the divorce, just signed papers in silence. But now that I'd seen her again, now that I had proof she was orbiting a life I didn't recognize, I couldn't let it go. She agreed to meet. Neutral territory. A cafe near the lakefront. She was already seated when I arrived, phone in hand, blazer draped perfectly across her shoulders. She didn't look surprised. "You look good," she said, sliding her sunglasses into her purse. "You're drinking wine now," I said instead. She smiled. "I know. Weird, right? Turns out it was the sulfites in certain kinds. I found a workaround." I wanted to believe that, wanted to nod and move on. But my gut was doing cartwheels. "I saw the photos," I said, "from the Wilcox event." Something flickered in her expression. Not shock, but calculation. "Oh," she said, picking at the sleeve of her sweater. "Yeah." One of the interns was going a little shutter-happy. "You and your boss," I said, watching her reaction. "You looked close." Liv laughed. "Just once. A little too sharp. It's just the angle, Dan. We were talking about his dog. He's obsessed with it. Keeps showing everyone pictures like a proud parent." "Right," I said. She leaned back, folded her arms. "Is that why you asked to meet? To interrogate me over a photo?" "No. I asked to meet because I saw something I wasn't supposed to, and you didn't even blink." She didn't speak right away, just stared past me at the street behind the window. "You were always the one who needed things to line up," she said eventually. "Always needed a reason, pattern, a confession." "Yeah, well, patterns usually show up when someone's trying to hide one." Her jaw tensed. "You're reading into nothing, Dan." But it didn't feel like nothing. Not then. Not now. What got me wasn't the photo. It wasn't even the wine or the casual int asterisk Macy with a man I'd never met. It was how unsurprised she was to see me reappear. How calm. How she'd looked at me that day like I was a footnote, not a ghost. She wasn't startled by my return. She was only unsettled that someone else had noticed. After seeing Liv again, seeing that photo, something shifted. It wasn't just about the picture. It was everything behind it, everything I hadn't let myself examine before. Like a scab I'd picked without realizing I was bleeding. That image, that casual touch, the look in her eyes. It reopened things I thought had scarred over. I started remembering things. Not all at once. More like flashbulbs going off in the dark. One memory would lead to another. And suddenly I was piecing together a version of our marriage I hadn't wanted to see when I was inside it. There was the Saturday she said she had brunch with the girls, but came home late, smelling faintly like unfamiliar cologne. Not overpowering, but sharp enough that I noticed, like sandalwood and something musky I never wore. She'd laughed it off, said she hugged a friend who had a thing for niche fragrances. I believed her. Why wouldn't I? You don't question things when you're in it. You rationalize, you trust, or you lie to yourself. Then there was that yoga phase. Liv had always made fun of yoga, called it expensive stretching. But one day, she came home with a rolled-up mat and told me she'd signed up for a month of classes at this trendy new studio downtown. I remember how surprised I was. She brushed it off. "I just need something to quiet my head," she'd said. "All the screens are frying my brain." The thing is, she never looked sore after class. Never talked about instructors or flow sequences or anything that people usually obsess over when they're starting something new. I only saw her wear the leggings and hoodie on the way out, never back in. One time I offered to come with her, try a class together. She shut that idea down fast. "It's kind of my thing," she'd said. I let it go. I always let it go. I thought about the weekends she suddenly started visiting old friends. Names I'd never heard before. Sarah from college. Nia from her book club. People who, in hindsight, didn't exist. One time she said she was spending the weekend with her friend Bailey in Michigan. Later, when I saw her photos on Instagram, she'd forgotten to crop the city skyline out of the background. That wasn't Michigan. That was our own damn neighborhood. Back then, I told myself it was harmless. She needed space. Needed to feel like she had her own life outside of us. I'd always prided myself on not being controlling. I gave her room, maybe too much. And then there was the coffee cup. It sat in her car's cup holder for 2 days. One of those reusable branded ones from an indie coffee shop in Wicker Park. But scribbled in black marker across the side wasn't her name. It was M. Just M. I saw it on a Thursday when I borrowed her keys to grab something from the glove compartment. I held it up when she came home that night. "This yours?" I asked. She didn't miss a beat. "Oh yeah, I must have grabbed someone else's order by accident." The barista was flustered. She laughed like it was a funny story. But now I remember the way she looked down as she said it. The way she quickly tossed the cup in the trash under the sink. Like it was contaminated. I hadn't thought twice about it. Now I couldn't stop thinking about it. It's amazing what the mind will ignore when it wants to keep the story clean. There was a time when she used to fall asleep texting me. Back when things were simpler. I'd get these half-asleep messages. "Miss you. You up?" Followed by a heart or a sleepy emoji. She'd laugh about them the next morning. But slowly those texts faded. She started turning her phone on Do Not Disturb, claiming she needed to unplug. I respected that. I even admired it. But then I'd hear it buzz at night. Not often, just once or twice. I'd glance over, and she'd flip the screen face down so fast it might as well have been on fire. "Work thing," she'd say. "There's only so many work emergencies you can believe at 11:45 p.m. before you start asking yourself who's on the other end." Of course, I never said anything. I'd been the one to leave after all. I was the one who had packed my bags, driven out of the city, and dropped off the grid. But even before that, long before the final argument, before the slammed doors and quiet dinners and broken sleep, something had shifted. And now I couldn't unsee it. I pulled up old texts, old photos, old emails. Scrolled back through our timeline like a detective in my own life. What I found wasn't anything damning. Just gaps. Gaps I hadn't noticed before. One email, in particular, stuck with me. It was from a year before our divorce. Liv had forwarded me an itinerary for a retreat her office was hosting. 2 nights. Upstate. A wellness lodge with team-building exercises. She even sent me a picture of the room she'd booked. 2 beds, plain, beige. I didn't think about it until now, when I searched the lodge's website and found the same room. Still listed. Except it wasn't a double. It was a king. When I clicked through the image gallery, I saw a wine tasting package. Liv, who hated wine, who got migraines, who was suddenly drinking it now like it was part of her personality. I stared at the screen for a long time, until the backlight started to sting. It all clicked. The wine wasn't new. She had been drinking it then, just not with me. The phone buzzes. A notification from an old shared calendar pops up. Liv Dog Park Noon. A recurring event from years ago. Back when we joked about getting a dog. We never did. But she started visiting the dog park anyway. "To clear my head," she'd said. "I like seeing the dogs." I believed her. Now I wondered who she'd been meeting. None of it was concrete. There was no smoking G***N. But it didn't have to be. These weren't clues. They were patterns. A sequence of small lies wrapped in convenience and timing. Back then, I was the guy who wanted to believe the best in people. Especially in her. I thought that's what love looked like. Trusting even when the logic frayed. Giving the benefit of the doubt until there was nothing left to doubt. But now I see it for what it was. She'd been preparing to live a life without me long before I'd walked away. Came on a Tuesday. One of those gray Midwestern afternoons where the sky hangs low and everything feels like it's holding its breath. I had just gotten back from the grocery store, still trying to figure out how to shop for 1 instead of 2, when I got a message from Ben Wexler. Ben and I hadn't spoken in years. We used to work at the same agency back before everything fell apart. He was the kind of guy who never deleted anything, emails, texts, receipts, the digital equivalent of a pack rat. I hadn't thought of him since I left Wilcox. But now there he was in my inbox with a subject line that just said, "Thought you'd want to see this." No greeting, no context, just a link. For a second, I hesitated. I stared at it like it might explode. Then I clicked. It was a video hosted on some private internal forum, the kind companies use for training content or archive presentations. The caption read, Client Summit 2021 Whitbridge plus Hartley Q&A session. Whitbridge. That was Liv's company. The video started with a shaky handheld sh*t of a stage. You could hear the rustle of papers, the low murmur of the audience. Then the camera steadied, and there she was, Liv, standing next to Marcus Thorne, the same man from the photo, her boss, the one she swore she barely knew outside of the occasional meeting. Only this wasn't a meeting. This wasn't some awkward networking event. This was something else entirely. They were co-presenting a panel on leadership development, the kind of thing Liv used to roll her eyes at when she saw it on LinkedIn. But there she was, holding a microphone, wearing a soft gray dress that fell just below the knee, speaking with the poise of someone who'd done this before. Marcus stood beside her, tall and relaxed, nodding at everything she said like he already knew the answers. Occasionally he'd lean in to whisper something, and she'd laugh quietly, as if the audience didn't exist. But that wasn't the moment that gutted me. Came at the end. As the crowd clapped and the moderators wrapped things up, Liv and Marcus turned to exit the stage. And as they walked, his hand slid around her waist. Not on her back. Not near her arm. Her waist. The way you touch someone when the air between you isn't professional anymore. And the worst part? She didn't flinch. Didn't pull away. She leaned into it, casually, instinctively, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Her smile was soft, familiar, not polite, not forced. Mate. I paused the video, rewound it, watched it again, and then again. It wasn't just the touch. It was everything that came before it. The ease, the small looks, the quiet familiarity you only develop with someone over time. You don't get that from a few board meetings or shared emails. This wasn't a friendship. This wasn't a colleague. This was a relationship, lived out just far enough from public view to be deniable. Until now, I sat there in my kitchen with my laptop open, half a carton of eggs on the counter, and a knot in my chest so tight I could barely breathe. My hands were shaking, not from rage, not yet, but from something deeper. Like my nervous system had just received final confirmation that everything I suspected was real. This wasn't paranoia. This wasn't projection. This was proof. You always imagine those moments differently. You think there'll be shouting, a slam table, some wild cinematic collapse. But it wasn't like that. It was quiet, still, like the moment before a storm when all the birds disappear. I didn't call her, didn't text. What would I even say? I just sat there for a long time, staring at the frozen frame of her on that stage, his hand resting at her hip like it belonged there. And I remembered how, near the end of our marriage, Liv had started waking up early. She was never a morning person. She used to say getting up before 8 a.m. should be illegal, but then something shifted. She started setting alarms for 6:30, said she wanted to journal, reclaim the day, whatever that meant. At first, I admired her discipline. I even tried it with her once. Lasted 3 days before I gave up. But she kept doing it. Every morning like clockwork. Always out the door by 7:15, yoga mat in hand or sometimes just a coffee and a book. Now I wondered if it was him. If those early mornings were just cover for quiet breakfasts, long walks, or hotel lobbies where no one would think to look. All those mornings I stayed in bed while she got centered. Maybe she was just slipping away. It's strange. The things you revisit once the illusion breaks. Like the way she'd stop using our shared Spotify account and started making her own playlists. Or how she got really into essential oils for a month. Something she never cared about before, then dropped it just as fast. Or the time she started signing off texts with just her initial, even to me. L. I remember asking her if she was texting someone new. She said no. Said I was reading into it. Said I needed to stop turning every small change into a crisis. But now I knew what I had always feared. I hadn't left our marriage. She had. Long before the words were ever spoken. Long before the fight that ended it. Long before I drove away from that apartment for the last time, thinking maybe I was the one who couldn't stay. Turns out I was just the one who noticed too late. I shut the laptop, walked to the bathroom, splashed cold water on my face like it would wash something off. Didn't. I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize myself. Not in that dramatic movie trailer way. Just real. I looked like a man who had been rewritten without his permission. I went back to the living room, pulled out an old box from my closet. Photos, notes, airline stubs, the small debris of a life we built. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sorted. There's a weird piece in evidence. Because once you know, really know, there's no more pretending. No more wondering if you're crazy. No more playing lawyer and prosecutor in your own mind. The trial is over. The verdict is in. I wasn't part of her life anymore. And maybe I hadn't been for a long, long time. The first time I realized Liv had erased me was by accident. I wasn't looking for her. Not directly. I was just on my laptop late one night, trying to distract myself, and ended up falling down an old rabbit hole of Googling people from my past. Coworkers, high school classmates, college roommates. Curiosity, nostalgia, maybe just a need to see that someone else's life had changed too. Eventually, I typed her name, Olivia Harris. Nothing shocking at first. A few professional articles, a glowing LinkedIn profile, a video of her speaking at a women's leadership panel. She looked poised, polished. Every part of her life neatly arranged into digestible sections. Her bio described her as a senior strategist at Whitbridge, with a passion for building inclusive teams and resilience through life's challenges. That word stuck with me, resilience. Then I found it. A magazine feature, one of those glossy lifestyle pieces you scroll past while waiting for coffee. The Women Who Lead was the title. Liv was one of them. She looked radiant in the photo. White blouse, soft lighting, arms folded with confidence. I skimmed the article, wondering if she'd mention anything about our time together. Instead, I got this. After experiencing a personal loss 5 years ago, Olivia Harris chose to channel her grief into reinvention. That moment taught me how fast life can change, she says, and how strong you have to be to keep moving forward. Personal loss. I read it 3 times before it sank in. She wasn't talking about a death in the abstract. She was talking about me. I hit Ctrl+F. Typed in my name. Nothing. Not a single mention. I checked her LinkedIn again. Scrolled through old connections. Comments. All gone. She'd scrubbed me out completely, not just from the bio, but from the record. There was no ex-husband. There was no marriage. There was only resilience. I leaned back in my chair, heart pounding, suddenly freezing in my own apartment. I thought back to all the years we spent together, holidays, vacations, arguments, anniversaries. All of it vanished with a clever narrative shift. To the world, I wasn't her ex. I was dead. Later that night, I searched deeper, found another piece, a podcast interview. The host introduced her as a widow-turned-executive. I sat in stunned silence as Liv's voice came through my headphones, steady and sincere. I went through something really difficult, she said, and I don't talk about it much, but I lost someone I loved. It was sudden, a hiking accident. He was alone, and that kind of grief changes your wiring. You realize you're either going to sink, or you're going to swim. My mouth went dry. A hiking accident? We hiked once a year, twice maybe. I got shin splints. She complained about the bugs. We were not hikers. We were not outdoors people. We lived in a second-floor apartment with 2 houseplants we couldn't keep alive. But there it was, spoken like gospel. I was no longer a man who left. I was a man who died alone on a mountain. I shut the laptop and just sat there in the dark, stunned by how easily truth could be bent. Not just bent, deleted. She hadn't just moved on. She'd rewritten the whole story. At first, I thought maybe it was just spin, a career rebrand, something to tug at heartstrings and make her leadership seem more heroic. But the more I looked, the more I realized how deep it went. Our wedding photos? Gone. Not private. Not buried. Gone. Even the Facebook albums that her mother once tagged me in, deleted. I checked the Wayback Machine, hoping maybe one of the old URLs had been cached. One had. I opened it. Error 404. I wasn't just absent. I was erased. I logged into an old joint email account we'd used once for shared bills. Mostly spam these days, but still accessible. I searched for keywords: photos, albums, gallery. One result popped up: a shared album from a photographer we'd hired for our second anniversary shoot. I clicked the link. This gallery has been permanently removed by the account owner. Of course it had. Even public records had been tampered with. Her online profiles had quietly dropped Harris and reverted to her maiden name. Not just on paper, but in personality. Olivia Maddox now. Harris was never part of the timeline. I called an old mutual friend, Rachel. We hadn't spoken in years, but I figured if anyone would remember, it would be her. She and Liv used to be close. "Hey, Dan," Rachel answered. Her voice was surprised but warm. "Wow, it's been a minute." "Yeah," I said. "Listen, I have kind of a weird question." We caught up for a few minutes, just polite chatter. Then I asked her if she'd kept in touch with Liv. "Oh, sure," she said. "Not as often, but we text sometimes. She's doing well. Tough few years, obviously." I hesitated. "Yeah. About that. What did she tell you?" Rachel paused. "You mean about you?" "Yeah." There was a long silence on the line. "She said you'd passed," Rachel said finally. "That it was. I don't know, some kind of accident. I didn't press. It didn't feel right." "You didn't think to check?" I asked. She sighed. "Dan, I did. Once. But everything was so quiet. You were just gone. I figured maybe it was true." "I'm not dead, Rachel. I can hear that," she said gently. "I'm sorry. I didn't blame her. I blamed myself for going off the grid so hard, for giving Liv just enough silence to paint whatever picture she wanted. And she had. She hadn't just turned the page. She burned the book and wrote another. A few nights later, I dug through my own boxes, the ones I hadn't touched in years, moved from apartment to apartment, unopened. In one of them, I found the only hard copy I had of our wedding photo. It was us, standing beneath that oak tree in southern Illinois, the wind catching her veil just right. I stared at it for a long time. Then I flipped it over. There, in her handwriting: "To the life we promised each other. Forever and a day." Forever ended. The promise didn't. She just rewrote it into fiction. And somewhere in that fiction I had died. Quietly, neatly. A tragic chapter she could use to frame the rest of her story. There was no obituary, no article, nothing public. Just whispers. Just "he's gone." She never said what really happened. Never admitted we'd drifted. Fought. Failed. That she'd let go before I even realized we were falling apart. That she was already building something else with someone else. Instead, she chose the cleaner version. The noble one. Widowhood sells better than divorce. And the truth? The truth was buried under the narrative. Her narrative. I didn't know why I went back. Maybe I wanted closure. Maybe I wanted to punish myself. Maybe I thought if I stood in the places we once lived, something buried would unearth itself. Some proof that it hadn't all been a lie. That I had been real in her story once. Not just a placeholder she eventually erased. The town hadn't changed much. Same quiet streets, same uneven sidewalks. The bookstore we used to go to on Sundays was still there, its windows dustier now. I walked past it slowly, not even sure what I was looking for. That's when I saw Kaylee, Liv's sister. She was standing just outside the shop, her hair pulled up in that same careless bun she always wore. She was older now, sharper around the edges, but still recognizably Kaylee. The one who used to bring over half-melted ice cream and binge trashy TV with us on rainy nights. When her eyes met mine, she froze. Her expression twisted, halfway between disbelief and fear. For a second, I thought she might run. Instead, she walked straight over to me, pulled something from her coat, and pressed it into my hand. A small, sealed envelope. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. Kaylee turned and walked away before I could speak, disappearing down the block like a ghost in reverse. I stood there on the curb, watching her go, the envelope clenched tight between my fingers. There was no return address. No name, just a key inside. and an address written in Liv's handwriting, unmistakable, looping, practiced. It led to a storage facility on the edge of town. The kind people stop using but forget to cancel. I drove there before I could change my mind. The place was run down, rust lining the corners of every door. The manager was asleep in the front office, an old radio playing static. I didn't sign anything, just walked straight to the unit number Kaylee had written. The key turned with effort. The door groaned. Inside, the air was stale, like old paper and forgotten summers. A single overhead bulb flickered to life, casting everything in pale yellow. The unit wasn't packed, just one box, and beside it, something strange, a mannequin. It stood quietly against the back wall, dressed in clothes I hadn't seen in years. My clothes, an old flannel I used to wear to bed, faded jeans, pair of worn-out sneakers I thought I'd thrown away. Even the glasses I'd broken during a move were perched on its face, and around its finger my wedding ring. I stared at it, breath catching in my throat. It was me, or rather a version of me constructed, arranged, preserved. Next to it, on the ground, sat the box. I knelt down, opened it. Inside were letters, dozens of them, each one dated on my birthday, each envelope sealed and addressed in Liv's familiar script. I pulled out the top one. It was dated the year after I left. Dan, I don't know where you are. I don't know if you'll ever see this, but I still made your favorite pancakes this morning out of habit. Couldn't eat them. I just sat at the counter staring at the empty chair across from me. I keep thinking you'll walk in and say you were just clearing your head. That we'll laugh about how dramatic this all got. But the clock keeps ticking and the door doesn't open. I miss you. Even when I'm angry, I miss you. Some lines were crossed out, others rewritten. The ink changed colors halfway through. The handwriting grew messier, like it had been written in pieces. I opened another. Dan, you left me with the silence. Do you even care what that did to me? I used to think I'd be okay eventually. But every time I try to move forward, I hear your voice in the house. I see your face when I close my eyes. If you're alive, then why do you feel like a ghost? Each letter was different. Some rambling, some bitter, some barely legible like she'd written them while crying. A few ended mid-sentence. One was soaked through, the ink bled into abstract shapes. I kept reading, year after year. She had written to me every birthday since I left, but never sent them. They just lived here in this unit, beside the version of me she'd constructed, not from memory, but from whatever she'd been trying to hold on to. There were newspaper clippings too, folded carefully, stored beneath the letters. At first, I thought they were unrelated, missing persons, cold cases, articles about hikers or drifters gone quiet. Then I looked closer. They were all men, different ages, different cities. But every article was marked the same way. Names circled in red ink. Notes scribbled in the margins. Dates, flight paths, last known sightings. And at the bottom of each one, scrawled in her handwriting, "Not him." The words chilled me. Not him. Not me. Had she been searching? Or worse, hoping? It didn't make sense. She told people I was dead. Spun a narrative, built a career around loss. Yet here, in this storage unit, was a shrine to a truth she'd never let go of. A version of me she'd refused to bury. Letters that screamed at my absence. A mannequin dressed in memory. I sat down hard on the concrete floor, knees folding under me. My head was spinning. This wasn't grief. This was something else. Obsession. Denial. Control. Maybe all of it. She'd rewritten the public version of our life. Scrubbed me clean from the record. But in private, in this hidden corner of her world, I had never left. I had been trapped, fossilized, a man frozen in the year I walked away. A ghost. Not dead. Not alive. Just waiting. The mannequin stared back at me in silence. I couldn't stay in there any longer. I stood, grabbed one letter at random, and walked out. Left everything else behind. I didn't know what to do with it. Burn it? Read them all? Deliver them back to her? I just knew I couldn't unknow any of it. That night, back at my rental, I set the letter on the table and stared at it for hours. I didn't open it again. Just looked at my name on the envelope, wondering which version of me she was writing to that year. The villain? The lover? The memory? What unsettled me most wasn't that she lied about me. It was that she never let me go. She buried me in the world's eyes while keeping me alive in secret. In a box. In a mannequin. In unsent words. Like she couldn't decide what story she wanted more. The one where I left. Or the one where I never could. Back at my rental, I found something taped inside the refrigerator. A blank envelope. Inside was a Polaroid me sitting in a cafe 2 years ago reading a book. Dated. Labeled. I hadn't known anyone was watching. Minutes later, my phone buzzed with a message. You need to disappear again. Then, files began vanishing, photos, videos, backups. Even off-cloud drives went blank. Everything I'd gathered about Liv, the letters, the footage, the clippings, gone. Kaylee's number? Disconnected. My email? Compromised. I wasn't just a ghost in her narrative anymore. I was being erased. Deliberately. Precisely. Someone, maybe Liv, maybe not, was scrubbing every trace of me out of existence. The walls were closing in, and I realized this wasn't about loss. It was about control. And I had underestimated how far she was willing to go to maintain her version of the truth. With nowhere else to turn, I reached out to Karen Morris, the only person who'd ever questioned Liv's narrative. She met me without hesitation and handed me a key to a safety deposit box. Inside, a cassette. Liv's voice filled the silence, trembling and raw. She admitted rewriting me into death because she couldn't face the chaos of being left. It was easier than admitting I wasn't enough, she said. If you died, I never had to explain why you stopped loving me. In that moment, I understood. To her, I wasn't a memory. I was a fixed point, a story she could frame and display. I left the tape, the letters, and a single photo on her doorstep. No confrontation, no final words. She opened the door, saw what I returned, and didn't follow. I left not to disappear, but to finally live. And this time, the story was mine to tell.